Hello everyone and welcome to A Slice of My Life. In this video, I wanted to talk about this, the Kizer Mini Sheepdog. And no, it's not just any mini sheepdog, it's the newest version that sports a button lock and a thumb slot, so no flipper tab. Why am I doing another video on the Kizer Mini Sheepdog? That's because in my opinion, this is the best version of the mini sheepdog that Kizer's ever put out. I'm bringing in my other sheepdogs in the herd to help us out in this video, starting with the first mini sheepdog that I procured, the original titanium frame lock version. Next is the Kizer Friday Club April 2020 limited edition mini sheepdog. This is a liner lock version that sports the Kizer Friday Club exclusive blue resin scales with grain husks. Following that is the thumb slot version that sports raffia scales. I've seen pictures on Instagram where some highly skilled modders perform the flipper delete and thumb hole mods on the sheepdogs, but then Kizer released their own quote-unquote modded variant. This version sports a liner lock and I bought this in October 2022. Now I'm gonna get a little more detailed about the differences between all four of these mini sheepdogs, and the differences go beyond the surface. First, the original titanium version. The opening mechanism is via a rather chonky flipper tab. It sports an anodized pivot collar and also has full window cuts through the scales, which looks really cool. The scales are also slightly contoured, so they feel really comfortable in hand. On the lock side, you have the lock bar, and this is a frame lock, as well as a nice, thick, milled pocket clip. The blade action is very good. Deployment is snappy and closure is smooth. The blade steel on this one is S35VN, and the blade sports a stone-washed finish. Next is the Kizer Friday Club exclusive version. I was drawn to this version simply because of the very beautiful scales. However, the scales aren't contoured, much like the older liner lock versions of the mini sheepdog. Also, this version falls under the budget category of the mini sheepdog, so it sports a flat metal pocket clip, nothing fancy. It also sports a chonky flipper tab. The blade steel on this one is 154cm and sports a satin finish. The serialization is located on the other side of the blade. I'm one of the lucky ones that have the serialization mark for this limited run version. The locking mech is a liner lock, and truth be told, reaching in to disengage the lock isn't very comfortable here. Deployment is snappy, however, while the closing is smooth, it's not as smooth as the titanium version. Next up is the thumb hole opener, flipper delete version with the raffia scales. All the hardware on this version are coated black, including the milled pocket clip. The scales are contoured, but while the raffia material looks beautiful, I'm not a fan because you can feel the metallic part of the pattern sticking out just a little, which takes away from the overall experience of handling the knife. I gotta say though, the removal of the flipper tab makes the sheepdog look extra sleek. Now for this particular sheepdog, I need to highlight that the detent is exceptionally sharp and strong. I'm not sure why it's done this way, but you'll definitely have to put in effort to deploy the blade. So if you're looking to do a spidey flick or a thumb flick, as long as you can get past the detent, the blade will fly open. It took me a bit of practice and a small dose of pain, but I eventually got the hang of it. S35VN is the blade steel for this version, and the blade sports a satin finish. Slow rolls are kind of possible with this, but here, have a look at how the blade pops out due to the strong and sharp detent. And just like the previous version, this version is a liner lock, and accessing the lock bar isn't the most comfortable thing to do. Maybe Kizer could consider recessing the show side scale a little more. And lastly, my newest addition to the family, the button lock version with the richlite scales. It's the only version with a deep carry pocket clip, and I absolutely love it. Even the screws are recessed. Even though this version falls under the budget side and the pocket clip isn't a milled one, this alone, in my opinion, is way more functional than the others so far. Now this is the first time I'm experiencing richlite as a material, but I have to give it up to Kizer for this. The scales are very well done here, contoured comfortably, and the finish of the richlite has a slight texture that I would describe as slightly chalky and provides a really nice grip. Now of course, this is the only version that sports a button lock, and it works very well. The blade steel here is 154cm and has a stone-washed finish that matches the pocket clip. The action on this is very good. Once you disengage the lock, the blade swings free and the detent is well done too. You'll be able to thumb flip and spidey flick it open with absolutely no problem and doesn't require you to overexert yourself like on the Raphael version. Now, like I mentioned, the differences go beyond the surface level and it's also maintenance day, so I'm opening all of these bad boys up. Off goes my rings for this. Now, all the Sheepdogs use hardware of the same size, so that's T8 Torx for the pivot screw and T6 Torx for everything else. And now that we have all of them disassembled, let's go in the same order, starting with the titanium frame lock version. This version uses brown nylon style caged ball bearings, and I gotta admit here, I don't know the exact type of bearings these are, and has an additional washer that sits in a recess in the scales. The washers also have a track for the ball bearings. As for the blade, note that it is flush around the pivot area. Next is the Kizer Friday Club exclusive version. I'd like to first point out that this is a liner lock version and that the liners and scales have the same silhouette and stack flush with each other. This version also uses the same brown nylon style ball bearings as the titanium frame lock version. The blade is made a little different though. There is a recessed slot for the bearings around the pivot area and these have a track cut in. They look like washers, but take my word for it, they're not. So in terms of construction, the pivot area is kind of like the opposite from the titanium frame lock version. Now we move on to the Raphael version. While this is also a liner lock, note that the liners sit inside a recessed area cut out in the scales. The liners are coated in black except for the pivot area to allow for a smoother operation of the bearings. The blade on this version also has a recessed slot for the bearings, but it's a flat slot without a track cut in. Moving over to the bearings in this version are different and these are metal caged ball bearings. Lastly, the button lock version. The liners here are, yet again, different. And the liner to scales ratio is a lot less here, and this is only possible because there is no lock bar. Of course, being a button lock, you'll have the internals for the locking mechanism as well. The bearings on this version are kinda the same as the bearings in the first two, but it's in black this time around. Again, I don't know the specifics of these bearings, so I can't say if the only difference is in the color. The blade, of course, is made different since it's a button lock, but I wanted to point out that it also has a flat recessed slot around the pivot for the bearings. Now, I don't know why Kizer seems to be constantly changing the design and construction of the mini Sheepdog. I'm the sort of guy that sometimes gets hit with an urge to mess around and do simple things like blade swaps or scale swaps with knives that I own multiple versions of, but this quote-unquote inconsistency with the bearings, the location of the bearing slots, the inconsistent usage of washers, the different scale to liner ratio for liner locks means that if you're someone like me, you won't be able to do these simple swaps. I know not everyone is like that, but for me, sometimes I do things like that to kinda keep things fresh. It's like my relationship with the Spyderco Para 3. So anyway, it's time to wrap this video up. Now that I've shown you the differences between all of the Sheepdogs so far, it's easy for me to articulate why the richlite button lock version is my favorite. It's the only one that comes with a deep carry pocket clip that is well made and well executed with the recessed screws. It's got a detent that is strong, but not obnoxious. The button lock is way more fidgety and definitely easier to disengage than on the liner lock versions. Needless to say, the action on this is satisfying, and the richlite scales feel really good in hand. All of that, and the fact that it doesn't have a flipper tab and features a thumb slot opener are, to me, what makes the button lock mini Sheepdog the best version by Kizer so far. My only gripe is that it's only available in the budget line that features 154cm blade steel. This means higher maintenance requirements for me, but hey, you win some, you lose some, right? And that is it everyone, thank you so much for sharing in this slice of my life. If you enjoyed this video, please clicky the likey. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell. It would really help the channel out. Stay tuned for more videos coming your way, and I will catch all of you in my next slice. Bye!